Welcome to Old Classic Car. In this compilation we are looking at Jensen cars of 1950 and onwards, and to begin with this cracking CV8 in mid blue. And I'd recommend when you've finished watching this particular video, check out the world's fastest Jensen website, and it'll give you the full lowdown on this incredible V8 powered projectile. This was taken a few years ago, this and the next photograph, and it has changed a great deal in the intervening years. There are a couple more photographs of this car at a different event later in this particular compilation, but yeah, it's well worth having a read about this world's fastest Jensen project, because it's quite an incredible build by all accounts. Next up we are over to Bicester Heritage, and this magnificent Jensen 541 TPX 212, and if you put that registration number into Google Images you'll find quite an interesting array of photographs of this car pre and post restoration. It's quite a project. This is the 24th Jensen 541 ever built, dating to 1955. The 541 first came out in 1954, but what an incredible looking car that is. A lot of Austin componentry hidden underneath that very sleek body shell as well. Next up, a Jensen Interceptor, the first of many Interceptors that will feature in this particular collection. FRY8L is the registration number of this particular car, first put on the road in December of 1972. Okay, we are down at the Haynes Motor Museum now for the next Jensen in this collection. 3068 FM is the registration of this car. It's a 1963 car, very incredible car, 5.9 litre V8, and this one's been off the road since 2000, so presumably that's when it went into the museum down at Haynes. Now we're over at Goresworth Hall, and there was quite a gathering of Jensens there in 2023. I hope you've seen the video of the Goresworth Hall meet. That was an incredible do. And here we've got an FF, the four-wheel drive Jensen FF, which was introduced in 1967. Now we are down at Malvern for one of the regular classic car shows down there, and here we have the Jensen SV8. This is an early 2000s example. There weren't too many of these built either, but you can see many of the styling cues of the old CV8 made it into this, the SV8. There's a rear three-quarter view of the same car. Quite a distinctive looking car. I'm not quite sure how many of these were made, but probably wasn't a great deal. Wasn't a large number, certainly. Certainly not compared to cars such as the Jensen Interceptor. Next up in this Jensen collection we've got Hoff 1, another Jensen Interceptor, this one dating to 1971. Okie dokie, right, we are back to Bicester Heritage, early 2024, for the following two photographs of an M-registered Jensen Healey. This was a collaboration between Jensen and Healey, and under that bonnet is a Lotus engine. So a bit of everything in this particular car, and for many years they were overlooked in compared to, say, the MGC, which is parked in front, and some of the larger engine Triumphs. But yeah, these are quite an interesting car now, and they're starting to appear quite regularly at many of the classic car shows that we go to, and this is quite an unusual colour, looks like harvest gold almost, very similar to Dad's MGB. Okay, next up now, this photo of 610 YMA, Jensen C-V8. I took this one many years ago, and having a quick look online, this one actually hasn't been taxed since way back in 2008. It's a 1963 car. I wonder what the story is with this. Where is it now? Is it sat in the garage somewhere, awaiting a bit of new life perhaps? Okay, talking of injecting new life into an old car, here we've got a Jensen Interceptor mid-restoration. This was at one of the NEC car shows just a few years ago. Clearly plenty of work has gone into this one, and there's plenty more still to do, no doubt. If you can update me on this particular car, or indeed any of the classic Jensens that feature in this video, please let me know in the comments. You can just see a photo there on the information board of just how rotten this car was. I think it was underneath a drip in the garage, hence the big holes in the middle of the bonnet that you can just see in that old photograph. So yeah, incredible to see this particular project. And another CV8 and also DLN registration number, like the pale blue car at the very beginning of this compilation. This beautiful example turns up at many classic car shows in the area. I did actually try and buy one of these maybe 3 years ago, something like that, but sadly it fell through. The owner decided to put it into auction and made only a couple of £100 more than I offered. Okay, SJA131H, and we're at one of the restoration shows at the NEC. This Interceptor hasn't been untaxed since 1995, and it was first put on the road in May of 1970, so a bit of work ahead for somebody there. I can see a bit of rust underneath that rear window trim as well. Oh, look at this, CJL356C. This one sold for just over £6,000 last year, 2023. Clearly a lot of work ahead for somebody there. There was a pair of cars actually for sale in the same auction, and photos of the other car will appear a little later in this compilation. But yeah, the CV8 is one of those cars where good ones are quite strong money now, but poor ones are still relatively achievable, just due to the amount of work they require. Fiberglass body, aluminium skin doors, so yeah, a bit of work to do there. And the interior I think was pretty poor on this example as well. Been sat somewhere for a very long time. And in much happier condition is another example of the Jensen Interceptor, all 7.2 litres of it, big Chrysler V8 engine under that bonnet, many cooling louvers usually to be spotted on the bonnet of these cars. But yeah, what a svelte looking motor car that is. And here we go back to 541s, WXM54, that's a 541R. From November 59, this one belongs to Fuzz Townsend, I believe. I'm sure I've seen him with this one. This model, the 541R, was introduced in 1957 and brought benefits such as rack and pinion steering into the 541 design. Okie dokie, we're back to 1967 with this beauty, and another example of the CV8, and you can see what the engine access is like. The huge fiberglass rear hinged lift-up bonnet there. That's a really heavy bonnet. In places, I'm sure the fiberglass is ½ inch thick, with real quality. Look at the interior of it as well. What a proper GT car interior that is, absolutely stunning. And like I say, I did try and buy one just a few years ago, but sadly that fell through. So if anyone's got one sat around that they don't want and would like to donate it to the OCC garage, please get in touch. But yeah, not very likely, I know. Okay. Jensen Interceptor time again, and where were we for this one? I don't remember which particular car show we were at, but you can see the many louvers in the bonnet that I was talking about just a moment ago. Now here's a bit of an oddity. I wanted to try and include some really rare Jensens in this particular compilation. Thanks to Nev over in Australia for this and the next photograph. This is the original Jensen Interceptor. These were built from 1950 through to 1957, although they only made 88 of them in total. 32 of them were convertibles, and I think the rest were the fixed head sort of saloon stroke coupes. But yeah, what an incredible looking car that is. Looks a bit like an A40 Sports, but just a bit more grown up, a bit larger. But these were based on the Austin Shearline, the Shearline engine and the stretched A70 chassis. So that's a real rarity, that is. I'm so glad to be able to include it in this compilation. Now we are over at the Cholmondeley Castle Classic Car Show, and the matching pair of Jensen Interceptors there. In the foreground, UEF 663N. That's a 1974 example of the fantastic Interceptor. What an incredible looking car they are. And talking of incredible, let's not forget that Jensen did also dabble with commercial vehicles, and this is an incredible, this is a prototype of a Ford control truck. Now, I think it dates to about 1955. SSL 291 is the registration number, and this one was beautifully restored after languishing for many years in the field. Okay, we've got two more examples now of a blue Jensen Healey. This is on an M plate and looks fairly original apart from the silver and black number plates and those LED headlamps, which I don't think do a great deal for it, but interesting car now. Nice to see one with the factory hardtop on as well. Here's another blue example, this one with your more conventional headlights, still with the same alloy wheels, also on an M plate, but no hardtop in this particular car. And on the left there, you can just see the shooting brake version. We'll get a better look at that car a little later in this Jensen compilation as well. Another beautiful CV8 here. The CV8 first came along in 1962 and was built until 1966. Fiberglass body, aluminium skin doors, like I said before, and a big hefty steel chassis underneath all that. But I just think they're incredible looking cars. And we're back to the FF. You can tell this is an FF. It has a slightly longer front end, slightly squarer front end compared to the Interceptor, and the two sets of vents behind the wheel set into the wing there. That is where the added few inches are, apparently, compared to your regular Interceptor. And the FF, of course, is four-wheel drive, Ferguson formula. And we're back to Cholmondeley Castle, and another example of the pretty rare, comparatively rare, Jensen SV8. Quite an incredible looking car this is, and I'm glad to have been able to include a few examples in this upload. If you're a fan of Jensens, please let me know in the comments and tell me what you think of them. Maybe you own one now. And here we have another FF. This is quite an early car. I'm guessing that's probably a private registration number because the FF came out in '67. And so maybe it's correct actually, but what an incredible looking car that is. Pretty much the same engine, I believe, as the Interceptor, but the Ferguson formula four-wheel drive. And there is another Interceptor PhD 785M. That is an early 1974 car. Still shows it's been taxed and on the road, and fitted with a 7.2 litre Chrysler V8 engine, as was the case with all this era of Jensen Interceptor. We're back now to the Jensen Healey, and it's just showing off its Lotus engine there. Yeah, it's always good to see these out and about. Much smaller than the Interceptor, much more of a sports car, whereas the Interceptor and the C-V8 before it were really GTs, grand touring cars. I'm talking of Interceptors, and the rear three-quarter view of a lovely mid-blue metallic example here, LGH113N is the registration of this one. First put on the road in September of 1974. I do love the style of these cars, originally designed by Touring over in Italy, Carrozzeria Touring. Now we're down at Silverstone, and I was glad to grab a photo of LGT155N while I was there. This was a few years ago, and we got a left-hand drive convertible version of the Jensen Interceptor dating to 1975, and that's quite a rare sight. I always think the hood doesn't look particularly finished off in those particular cars when it's folded. And not the world's greatest photo, but a fixed head version now of that very, very early 1950 to 57 Jensen Interceptor. Bit of a barn find this one, hence all the leaves on the front end. But yeah, that's a properly rare car. Really, really unusual. Has it been done now? Okay, we're back to Goresworth Hall, and another example of the Interceptor. There were a few different versions of this built between 1966 and 1976, and steel bodywork on these cars, whereas previously they were mainly fiberglass with just the odd aluminium parts here and there. And here we go. This is the shooting brake, the estate, I guess, version of the Jensen Healey, just called the Jensen GT. And looking at the size of those rear bumpers, I'm guessing, was this an export example, or maybe in the 1970s they all had bumpers this large. It's not a car I know a great deal about, so please pop a note into the comments if you can add more info. Okay, another CV8 project. Here's the second car that I referred to before, also a 65, and this also sold for £6,188 back in 2023. It's a colossal project. You really have to have a good poke around underneath these because, you know, you've got a steel chassis and so on. But yeah, how incredible. What a great looking car that is. I would quite happily run that as it is. Just do all the important stuff underneath, make sure it's all safe and solid and secure. But I'd quite happily run it as an oily ragger, even though it doesn't need an oily rag because it's mainly fiberglass what we're looking at here. The interior was looking a little bit dog-eared on this example, though. I wonder if the same person bought them both. Maybe they're going to build up one car from the two, or maybe restore them both. It'd be great to see in the comment section any news on either of these particular projects. But yeah, what an incredible car. I really hope they go on and be saved. Okie dokie, now we've got a maroon example of the Interceptor. Quite a few Interceptors feature in this particular compilation. It's one of the most common Jensens you see at the shows that we go to, and yeah, I'll always include them here because I just think they're a fantastic looking car. Such a swish car that is. Now we're back to the auction area, and you can see on the right hand side there just a little bit of the one of those CV8s that I mentioned before, and here a bit of a project example of right hand drive project Jensen Healey. I do like those wheels. Are they the original factory wheels or a different variation on the theme perhaps? Pretty cool nevertheless. Okie dokie, TEA 541 is next, a very appropriate registration. This is a June 1958 Jensen 541, and what a cracking looking car that is. This will be a 541R I believe, Note how the air intake rotates for added or indeed less ventilation depending on how cool the engine is running. And we're back to Interceptors and how many louvers are on that bonnet. It seems to vary. I'm assuming depending on the particular version of Interceptor that we're looking at. Maybe this is one of the later cars on an L plate. But yeah, really swish looking car. And two photos now of a bright red Jensen Healey. Those are the wheels that I more often associate with Jensen Healeys, and it gives us a good look at the hardtop. And look how there's like a bit of a cutaway for the filler cap on the rear panel there. There's just a like little cutaway piece on the hardtop. Just quite an interesting little detail. And there's a front three-quarter view of the same car. This was at one of the giant classic car shows held down at the NEC in Birmingham, the National Exhibition Centre. Yeah, this was always good to see this one. And a peek under the bonnet now of an Interceptor. There is a very large engine tucked away under that bonnet, and yeah, it's a pretty durable engine by all accounts. A good old American V8 there, clothed within an Italian designed body and built in West Bromwich in the Midlands. So yeah, quite an interesting car. And look at this. Someone's going to be brave taking this one on an FF, so it's a four-wheel drive Jensen FF. But wow, what a project that is. It looks like a project that someone started and then stopped for whatever reason. Is that the price? $25,995? Yeah, plenty of work ahead for someone there. But look at this beauty. KEA 29N. It's a beautiful 1974 Interceptor. Slightly wider wheels and tyres. Looks very purposeful. I think this is like one of these resto modded examples, I believe. This was at Sywell just a few years ago. I think 2016 possibly. And there's the same car just preparing to head out along the drag strip at the Sywell Aerodrome. That's a lovely car, that is. Just need to lose the Perspex number plates if it was mine. Get some proper nice metal plates on there, but otherwise, what a cracking looking car that is. We're back down to the NEC, and another example of the Jensen Healey, again showing off its Lotus engine. And this one has those proper old metal reflective plates that I was referring to just a few seconds ago. I think they always look just right on a sort of early to mid 1970s car. The plastic plates, I'm not so sure about. Lovely silver Interceptor here. That's a very fine looking car. I assume this is on the Jensen Owners Club stand. There's a bright yellow FF just parked alongside it. Again, you can just see the two sets of vents on the FF compared to the Interceptor in the foreground there. GUL 87N is another Jensen Healey. Bright yellow, this one. And there's that land speed record Jensen in the background. And yeah, and again, this Jensen Healey's got a lovely set of metal plates on it. That's what you want on a car of this age, in my opinion. I bought a set of those when I had my Volvo 164. Now we're back to 541s, and this one is demonstrating the engine access of the bonnet arrangement on these particular cars. Like I say, that's an Austin engine tucked away under there. It's a little bit of a stretch to get at, and yeah, it's very similar to a Frog Eye Sprite actually, with that rear hinged bonnet arrangement. You don't often see Interceptors in white, but here is an example again on the Jensen Owners Club stand just a few years ago down at the NEC. Very sharp looking car indeed. Like I say, these were introduced in 1966, and wow, what a stir that must have caused. But back to CV8s, this is even the same colour as the car I went to go and have a look at in a distant barn and sadly was unable to buy. Maybe it was a good thing in the end, who knows. I would so much like to buy one of these one day though. ANH 667B. Not everyone's sold on the styling of these cars, but I just think they're phenomenal and they sound great. But saying that, these also sound great as well. We've got another example of the four-wheel drive Ferguson Formula Jensen FF. What another cracking looking car that is. Look at the size of the rear window on that car. I would not want to try fitting one of those. Next up, YLR 636, another glorious 541R. This one dates to 1960. Yeah, that was beautiful. The final evolution would be the 541S, which came along in 60. A slightly wider car, and it had a regular grille. It didn't have that rotating air intake. So it's a little bit more conventional. Now this is a car I was really pleased to include here. This is the 1950 Jensen PW. there is an information board which I photographed, and that'll follow this particular photograph. They only built 18 of these. It's 1950 and there are 4 known survivors, so same build year as our V8 Pilot, and again quite a retro looking design really for the era. There's just a bit more information about this particular car, the history of its early history, first registered as LGX 774 in July of 1950, and now living in Germany. Very, very few left. There's 4 known survivors, I think, not all necessarily in restored condition. Okay, bright yellow car here, and there's that 541 in the background, but in the foreground a bright yellow FF PBF 184K. It's the registration of this one. Very, very nice. Which of these Jensens would you go for? Would you go for an Interceptor, maybe the C-V8 or the 541 before that? Let me know in the comments. Or maybe you go for one of these. Another example here of the SV8. And I can't imagine they made too many of these. Did they even go into 3 figures, the production numbers? Probably not. I'd be surprised if they made more than 100 of these. This was at a pub classic car meeting quite a few years ago now, I think about 2016, something like that. And there's a rear view of it. Yeah, very, very distinctive. I'm not entirely sure about the shape of the back end, but it's certainly distinctive and there's no mistaking it for anything else. XVV5 is a private registration number, so we can't get any dating details off that unless we go on the DVLA website. And we're back to CV8s again, and a beautiful example of the V8 powered CV8 there. What a swish car that is. I think it's pretty much the fastest car of its type back in the 1960s. It certainly show an E-type, a clean pair of heels by all accounts. We have another Jensen Interceptor here. That is a fine looking motor car indeed, and again we're down at the NEC, and that's certainly, if you want to see a variety of cars, the NEC Classic Car Show is the place to go, but just take some good shoes with you because there is a lot of walking involved. And we're back to Jensen Healey's here, soft top, roof down, and this was, I believe, at an auction, I think at Alton Park, possibly at the Alton Park Gold Cup just a couple of years ago. ALP24H was also at one of the auctions held at Alton Park Gold Cup. This particular car was put on the road in August of 1969, and yeah, it looks pretty sharp in that fetching shade of green as well. Really, really quite an impressive looking car. Quite thirsty though, but certainly impressive. And here we've got an old press photograph circa 1974 of the Interceptor convertible. We saw that photograph that I took at Silverstone quite a few years ago, and this is the press photo from mid-1974. Yeah, like I said before, the soft top, the way it folds down, not below, it isn't flush, so it looks a bit clunky, I always think. And here we have 2 photographs now, again, of the world's fastest Jensen.co.uk. And yeah, clearly a lot more development work had been undertaken between the first photos shown of this car at the beginning of the video and of it here at Race Retro, I believe this was. So certainly a pretty wild looking car. Look at that. That really is something. And as I've said a couple of times now, I'd recommend checking out the world's fastest Jensen website when you're finished with this video here, because it really is quite an interesting project. It's looking very, very different now. Perhaps not better, but certainly very, very different now. And we finish with just an overall view of the lineup of Jensen Interceptors at Goresworth Hall in Cheshire. Again, there is a video for that particular event elsewhere on the channel. So thank you very much for watching this tribute to 1950 onwards Jensens. Thanks to Nev for sending the photos of that really early Interceptor convertible over. That was really, really appreciated. So thanks very much for watching. Please check out the rest of the channel, and there'll be many, many more videos along very, very soon. So bye for now.